My uterus woke up and chose violence. No joke, that's exactly what it felt like because these contractions came on quick. So here's the backstory to my birth story. I was a week past my due date, you know, those like dates that we guess when a baby might show up, but they come when they're gonna come, let's be real. And so here I was at 40, turned 40 weeks, I was coming up on 41, and my OB was like, listen, I'm okay, we're gonna monitor you. I have another video all about what we monitored. I'm okay monitoring you, but once we get to 41 weeks, we're gonna have to do something here. And so on the eve of what would be 41 weeks, I went to pumping. So I pumped that night to stimulate my nipples. I was doing curb walking, I was doing all this stuff, but that was the thing that did it. So I pumped, stimulated my nipples with a manual pump. That's really fun. And the next morning I woke up and I was like, is it Braxton Hicks or is it go time? And if you've been there, then you know. So I send my husband off to get me waffles because I'm hungry. And I'm like, if this is anything like my first birth where I vomited like for 24 hours, I want to try to eat something. My first birth, I ate tacos with spicy salsa. It was like the best thing in my mouth, not the best thing coming back out of my mouth. So I learned. And instead I had a chocolate waffle with like lots of fruit and it was all deliciousness. And it was wonderful. Okay, so my husband, I send him out. I'm like, go get breakfast, come back. He's like, what if I miss it? I'm like, you're not gonna miss it. My babies, they take forever to come. My like N of 1 experience. And so he comes back, I eat the waffle, and literally from the time that I was like, okay, these contractions are coming, like they're actually steady, they're not like all over the place, and they're coming predictably. From the time I noticed that, messaged my birth crew, my contractions then just went into 5 minutes apart. And then within like 20, 30 minutes, they were 4 minutes apart, and they just rapidly progressed. And I was not expecting that. And I had been trying to work in bed up until I couldn't. My husband's like, stop working. I'm like, I need to be distracted, and I'm just gonna work. Like, but mind you, I had everything set up. I didn't have to work, but it was a really good distraction for me. So these contractions are rapidly progressing. Like my body's like, oh yeah, we've been training for this. Like been there, done that, watch me do my thing. And it did its thing. And so here I am wondering where my birth team is. I had put the clinic's number in my WhatsApp. That's how I was contacting everybody, as the WhatsApp contact for it's emergency go time, like get here and having a baby. And I had put that in my phone. And I thought that was the doula that I was contacting. And I'm like, why is nobody getting back to me? And meanwhile, I'm using this app to like count my contractions, and it's like this like meditation, and it's talking about running a marathon. I hated that lady like talking to me because I don't do noise well. But I finally message one of my doctors, and I'm like, where are you guys? Like, I'm about to have this baby. And they sprint. I tell them how far apart my contractions are. They're like, oh my God, let's get there. And, it was a very funny confusion because it wasn't until like the next day that I realized my mistake when I texted my doula and said, hey, I need some breastfeeding support. Like, will you come help me? And the clinic was like, we'll let your doula know. And I'm like, wait, what? So here I am, I'm like texting them before the clinic is even open, thinking I'm telling my birth team, like, let me just say that like, oh, I had my whole birth plan, but I'm messed up. But luckily, they got there in time. And they got there with like barely an hour to go. And I am just guttural. Like literally, all I'm doing is like, that's the noise. That was the energy I was bringing. And like I was up against the wall. I was just trying to stay upright because I was like, I am not going 24 hours again. Like if I could get it down to 18 hours. 4 hours. And I have to say, I reached that moment where I was like, I can't do this. And it is always that moment where you know baby's about to be here. When you say I can't do this, baby is about to arrive. And that is exactly what happened. And so with my first son, I planned a water birth. That did not happen because my contractions slowed every time I got in the water. When my birth team got there, they're very non-invasive, but I was like told my OB, like, check me. And he's like, I don't have to. And I'm like, no, do a cervical check. I want to know. And he was like, yeah, you're good. Let's get you in the tub. So I get in the tub. I'm laboring. I have to say, like, being in the tub and being just the position I was in, laying back, like, not my favorite position. And yet it was like the only thing that, like, I felt like, okay, I can get power, I can get strength here. And then came the point where I actually would get up on my knees so that they could do, fetal heart rate monitoring, and lift myself out of the tub, and then just try to, like, push down the energy and be like, expand cervix, expand. And at that point, I remember that last, like, heart rate monitoring, and I was like, it's go time. I need to push. And they were filling my abdomen and filling higher up because, like, bottom half is in the water. And they're like, his feet are up here. Like, I could still feel his feet. And mind you, I have a long torso. And I was like, no, it's go time. And they're like, no, but his feet are up here. And I'm like, excuse me, I know when something's in my vagina. And sure enough, there was a head making its way through my vagina. He just turned out to be super long, like 22 inches of baby. So I scream at my husband, get your swim shorts on, like, get in your swim shorts. He could have gotten naked, I didn't even care, but I know his modesty, and I was like, get your swim shorts on. And he's like, comes back in his swim shorts, and he's like, what do you want? I'm like, get in the tub, because this is how I talk when I am bringing humans in the world. You see those women who are all like, floaty, lovely, la, la, like, yes, love those women, not those women, not me. And so my husband gets in the tub behind me, and he's like, what do you need me to do? And I'm like, I just need something to push against, because I am not a big person and this tub is big, and I needed to push my feet against something. And that is when the pushing began. And I just have to say, like, my husband, he's so sweet. He's like crying, and he's like, oh, this is such a beautiful moment. Meanwhile, I'm screaming like, help me, which they're like, what do you want us to do? And I'm like, put some pressure on my perineum, like, somebody help me out. And, like, meanwhile, I'm in a birth tub. Like, they had to be, like, elbow deep to be in helping me. And let me just say, like, they were supporting me plenty. But the baby was coming so fast, I knew I was gonna tear. And, like, that's just, like, my number one goal in laboring. I'm just like, just don't let me tear. Number one, I did not tear. I had some fissures around my labia. That doesn't feel good when you pee, but, like, you are not as in much pain as when you tear. And mind you, I only had, like, a grade 1.5 tear. Like, I needed a suture, but it wasn't so bad, but it was bad enough that it hurt. It definitely hurt. And not so much of, like, oh, it hurt in labor, because, yeah, of course that hurts, but, like, it hurt for, like, 4 months. Which is just part of how my immune system works, and it doesn't like sutures all up in its business, but I digress. So my body just decided that, like, we were going to do this rapidly. We were going to not, like, float our way into having a baby, but we were going to go and we were going to have a baby. And so rapidly a human was upon me. And I have to say, 24 hours of labor, I was wiped out, and it felt like it took me like 2 weeks to really, like, start to come back to life. And my son wasn't sleeping. This one slept. But I have to say, 4 hours, he came midday. I then got a burger, like a big ass burger. It was like double patty. It was so good. But I was like, I need meat. That's my instant inclination. I lost blood. I need meat. And it was much easier after the fact to, like, only been at it for 4 hours. But I will say, it felt really violent in some ways, of just the contractions and the propulsion of everything. But at the same time, I will say that I very much felt, being in Mexico, like I was pulling on the energy of my ancestors and really, like, being supported. Like, energetically, I felt held. I had an amazing birth team, mind you, love them, all-star players, like MVPs of the birth scene. And I I really had a lot of power, and I felt like there was a wisdom to my body, and not just a wisdom to my body, but like information I didn't have but I needed, like somehow I was getting access to, in which that like I just intuitively knew things. And mind you, like, you know, everybody goes through their first time, and when it's your first time doing anything, you're like, how do I do this? And yet this time, like, I had the knowledge of before. Mind you, it had been like 8 years, but I also just, I had something really special. It was just a different feeling, and I can't really describe it. And I think if you know, you know. And if you're cynical and skeptical of those things, then you can just brush that off, because my experience doesn't have to be your experience, but this was my experience. So that is my birth story. That is how I ushered my second human into this world. Thank you for sharing it with me. Thank you for being here. And I really appreciate all of your support through the whole birth process and what's coming on of my first year postpartum.